Hi, I'm Andrew Wasson. Thanks for joining me for my weekly guitar blog. It's March 30th, 2014, and this week we're going to do a lesson discussing soloing over key changes. Now, this week's question was sent in from Isaac. He's out in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and he wrote in with this email. I'm in my high school jazz stage band, and I have to play a guitar solo over some difficult chord changes in 3/4 time. Because of this time signature, I'm finding that the chords go by so quickly, I just can't make it into the next idea fast enough. Is there some way to work on soloing over progressions that switch key a lot? I need to be able to make sense of where I have to go on my guitar neck. From Isaac in Minneapolis, Minnesota, USA. Well, hey, thanks for writing in, Isaac. There is a way to develop chord progressions like this, and since these kinds of chord changes could show up in many different styles of music, this solution I'm about to show you could apply to any style. Now, the solution will simply be to expand upon the length of time of the chords that are causing you difficulty. You could, of course, raise the time signature up in this case as well from 3/4 time up into 4/4. Plus, as we're going to do with the progression that I have for this video, we're going to take the progression and increase the quantity of the measures. That's the most important aspect to this whole system. So let's take a look first, though, at how this could operate. We're going to look at the chord progression on an on-screen capture and do some theory with it, and we're going to develop this further throughout this video. So let's go to the screen capture theory lesson right now.
Okay, so let's get started with the original progression. Let's say you were given this chord progression as a section of a tune where you had to perform a solo on, and you just simply found that these chords were moving too fast. There was too many complex harmonic movements for you to keep track of, and you just couldn't get your head wrapped around it. You know, we're in 3/4 time. At a quick glance of this piece, you can see here that we're in G minor. There's our 1 chord, and then the turnaround at the end here is obviously a dominant 7th 5 chord here. So let's begin by analyzing this progression, just kind of find out what we're dealing with here, how we're going to play over it. Obviously, off the first chord, we're going to start with some G minor sounds. This chord is a diatonic substitute for a D dominant 9th chord. So inside of a D dominant 9th, off the 3rd degree, we have an F sharp, which actually constructs the F sharp minor 7 flat 5 chord within the structure of the D9. So there's some other options we can do on that chord. We could go into D mixolydian. We could also just take a run through G harmonic minor scale. So we have some options to cover on that second measure. And if that wasn't something that you're interested in, you could of course also just play F sharp minor 7 flat 5 arpeggio. It depends on how long that chord's going to last. It's obviously not lasting long here, but we're going to look at it some different lengths of time when we expand the progressions. Now let's move on to the 3rd and 4th measures, because there's some interesting stuff happening here. Now at first glance, if you understand your modes and your modal theory, you'll see that this minor 6 chord is perfect stomping ground for the world of Dorian. Now there's something else that you can probably notice here as we move into this E flat major 7 chord. That is a 1 chord that is considered to be the parent to major scale key of this F minor 6. So if F minor 6 was Dorian, obviously this is the Ionian mode. So some people would approach this, like I personally would approach this on playing F Dorian, then going to E flat major. Some people would just go, it's all E flat major. I'm just going to play E flat major over the whole thing. So you can, make your decision there on scales for how you want to approach that. Next up, we have this A dominant 7th chord. It's a dominant 7th that's functioning as a secondary dominant, and it's pulling in this D dominant 7th chord here, which is actually the dominant 7th 5 chord. We had mentioned that earlier. Now there's some interesting things that happen. Now if you know and understand the world of secondary dominants that's out there, you understand that most of the time you're playing mixolydian mode over top of them. So if you played mixolydian on this chord, I would personally probably play mixolydian as well on the D7. So I'd play A mixolydian moving into D mixolydian. I know it also could encompass some sounds that are G harmonic minor. That's an option, but I probably wouldn't do that there, and I'll show you why. Here on this measure we resolve. So we have the D7 coming into the G minor 7 chord. Now here we establish some G minor tonality. So here I'd probably, of course, do some G natural minor scale sounds, G Aeolian. Now what I would do though is when we came off of that soundscape, I would move into G harmonic minor on this last chord, just because we're in this flavor and then we're coming out of that flavor that's with something that's related to it. in this D7, we're not really having that situation take place. We were in an A mixolydian format, and now we're moving into this D7. It's just going to sound like another dominant 7th chord, and in my opinion, D mixolydian is going to be a little bit better choice. So anyway, you can make your own decisions. You could play over this however you want. It's up to you. I'm just giving you some options here. You could do all arpeggios if you wanted to, but this is my take on it. The next thing I want to do, obviously, is expand this thing, because the concept here is that these chords are going by too fast. The time signature is not giving us enough time either to understand what to play. It's rushing by us in a blink of an eye, so we got to slow this thing down and get some manageable work to take place over it. So let's expand this progression out fully, and let's flip that diagram next and go over that work. Alright, now you can see what I've done is I've expanded the chord progression out to 16 bars. I've changed our time signature from 3/4 to 4/4, so now we have one extra beat per measure, and I've also expanded the length of time by an extra measure entirely for every one of those chords. So whatever scenario you decide to use to play over these changes, let's say you started with G natural minor scale, and then maybe over here you went to G harmonic minor, or whatever you decide to do, F Dorian or E flat major. You've got lots of time here now to be able to execute ideas. You can experiment, and if you record the progression at a fairly low tempo, you can really get going on quite a number of ways. And even if you can come up with a couple of ideas to like musical statements that you can use to cover some of the ways that one chord will move to another, you can always start modifying those later to help them fit the shorter time span that we're going to have with our original chord progression. So this would be sort of step one with the whole procedure to help you get used to a more complex set of chord changes and be able to solo over the key changes. But let's see what happens next when we get fairly decent at this one and we decide it's time to move on and go to something a little bit more challenging. So let's move to the expanded 8-bar progression next. Well, here we are at 4/4 time being the only difference between the original chord progression and the chord progression that we have in front of us now. Before, obviously, we had lots of time on every chord. Now we're just closer to the original in the respect of just having one measure per chord. So that means we're going to have to slightly modify some of the lines that we were working with. Some of the ideas that we had developed have to start shrinking. Chords are going to be coming at us quite a bit faster. You're going to really notice a pretty severe difference in the way the chords are hitting you. So take your time, redevelop some of the ways that you were working through your lines, and now that you've only got 4 beats per measure and those chord changes are coming at you faster, you have to start rethinking how you're approaching this material. So after this, obviously, you would break it down back to the original progression, which was obviously in 3/4 time, and then you're going to have to start compressing things yet further. So it's all about expansion, getting it out to a really large level that you can have some manageable time to execute all kinds of ideas and get used to running through the changes of the keys, and then begin contracting it and breaking it down smaller and smaller until you get to the original reconstruction of the original chord progression. And you're going to see that this method is very helpful. But to sort of get you a chance to hear how things operate with this, I'm going to flip over to the guitar next, and I'd like to play through these changes, get you a chance to hear what it's like to go and move through these chords and apply some of these scales and these ideas just live right off the floor and do some improvising. So let's go to that next.
Well, let's begin by doing some jamming on this set of changes. We're going to go through the use of the longest group of chord changes for this particular exercise, starting with, of course, that longer, easier layout in 4/4 time, utilizing 2 bars each chord, and it's going to create a 16-bar chord progression. So remember, it's in G minor, more or less. So overall, we've got some changes we've got to cover, so I'm going to play over it, and I got the whole progression programmed into the loop pedal. So I'm just going to go through the changes more or less how we discussed in the on-screen theory and analysis section of the video, and just jam out on it a little bit for you. So here we go. Okay, so let's head to the next chord progression where we're going to break it down into only 8 bars, but we'll keep it in 4/4 time. Okay, next, let's go and make things just a little bit more challenging with this progression. In the second time around with these changes, I'm going to break down the quantity of these measures from our first round of how we use 16 bars. And this time, I'm going to cut it in half. We're going to jam out on these same changes, and we're going to use 8 bars. So these chords are going to be flying at you a little bit faster. If they get a bit overwhelming, just head back to the 16 bar, do some work on that, come back to this one. If you go back and forth between them a little bit, you're going to start developing your connections between all the chord changes. So I'm just going to go and hammer out through these chords a little bit here, give you a chance to hear how this stuff sounds. Here we go. Okay, now that we've had some good rehearsal time spent upon developing the chord changes in an expanded sense, let's now restore the progression back to its original state. Now, the chord changes are going to be moving one into the next rather quickly now, so stay on your toes and, if necessary, compose some connecting phrases as a springboard in order to help get you through each of the key changes. So here we go. I'll just take some passes through that original 3/4 time 8-bar example. Well, there's no doubt that soloing over chord changes that modulate through different keys can cause a problem for, any guitarist who isn't used to having the key signature of a song change a lot. However, this obviously does happen in music, especially in jazz, and when it does, we need to apply different scale modes or arpeggios in order to cover the appearance of new chords and key signatures. Now, this type of work is certainly more advanced than simply playing over a set of blues chord changes in the key of A. So, like a lot of other complex musical concepts, we need to chunk it down so it's more manageable, and then as we improve, we can rebuild the concept slowly until it's restored back to its original state, and obviously we have a lot more control over it at that stage of the game. All it takes is patience and obviously a lot of rehearsals until you get it. So anyway, that's about all the time I have for today. As always, thanks for watching. Have yourself a great week, and I'll catch up with you next time. Bye for now.